Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki, Gaura Premanandi. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 8, correct? 3, 3, 8. Asamahorta ekasmin nanagaresho yoshitam savidham jagrahe panin anurupa svamayaya asamahorta ekasmin nanagaresho yoshitam savidham jagrahe panin anurupa svamayaya.
Samuhurta ekasmin nanagare yoshita sakitam jagrihe pani anurupa samayaya Asamuhurta ekasmin Savidam jagrahe panim Mayaya
Asamuhurta ekasmin nagarishu yoshitam jagrihe pani
Savidam jagrahe panim
anurupa samayaya
Asamahorta ekasmin
Savidam jagrahe
Asamuhurta ekasmin nagarishu yoshitam savidham jagrihe pani
Savidam jagrahe
anurupa samayaya
Asam, all these, excuse me, all those. Mahorte, at one time. Ekasmin, simultaneously. Nana agareshu, in different compartments. Yoshitam of the women, Savidham with perfect rituals, Jagrahe accepted, Panin hands, Anurupaha exactly to match, Svamayaya by his internal potency. Translation, all those princesses were still in the 16,100 princesses that were captured by Narakasura. All those princesses were lodged in different apartments, and the Lord simultaneously assumed different bodily expansions, exactly matching each and every princess. He accepted their hands in perfect rituals by his internal potency. Purport in the Brahma Samhita 533, the Lord is described as follows in regard to his innumerable plenary expansions. Advaitam achyutam anadim anantarupam adyam paranam purusham navayovanam cha vedeshu durlabam adurlabam atmabhakto govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. The Lord Govinda, whom I worship, is the original personality of Godhead. He is non-different from his innumerable plenary expansions, who are all infallible, original, and unlimited, and who have eternal forms. Although he is primeval, the oldest personality, he is always fresh and young. By his internal potency, the Lord can expand himself into various personalities of Swayam Prakash, and again into Prabhav and Vaibhav forms. And all of them are none different from one another. The forms into which the Lord expanded to marry the princesses in different apartments were all slightly different, just to match each and every one of them. They are called Vaibhava, Vilas, forms of the Lord, and are effected by his internal potency, Yogamaya. And the following verse concludes this particular topic. Just to expand himself according to his transcendental features, the Lord begot in each and every one of them 10 offspring with exactly his own qualities. Vibhushaya, Vibhushaya. Atma Tulyani, all like himself. Atma Tulyani. Now this message here in Canto 3, Chapter 3, text number 8, is not captured, as far as my memory goes, in the pastime that's described in the 10th canto, specifically that not only he expand his vilasa rupa forms, or vilas, vaibhav vilas form, but that each of the forms were slightly different. Doesn't give any detailed description, but other than to match the princess. You know, what is it with each princess that determined what slight variation in his manifestation would be performed or would be manifest? It's a new topic. It's an interesting topic. It's the same, the main point is, it's the same Supreme Personality of Godhead. Same in the sense of tattva. However, they're all forms of Krishna. They're not different personalities. They're all forms of Krishna. And they're equal in potency, like one candle lighting another candle, etc. They're all of the same potency, but some features. Let's read it again. The forms, this is in the purport, the forms into which the Lord expanded to marry the princesses in different apartments were all slightly different, just to match each and every one of them. Now, how does it work? For example, did they understand that Krishna has manifested a form and this other princess, another form, and another princess, another form, and the 16,100 princesses? Did they understand that Krishna had manifested himself in 16,100 Krishnas? What to speak of the slight differences between this Krishna and that Krishna and that Krishna? It doesn't say. We know from the 10th canto Bhagavatam, when Narada visits Dwarka, we hear that the queens, each of the queens, by the influence of Yogamaya, thought that Krishna's just with me. Now, they must have talked with one another. So how did they not know that Krishna is also with them? This one, that one, the other one. How did they not know? Well, Yogamaya, that's a possible explanation. They surely understood that they're married to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is, the Aishvarya feature of the Lord was manifest externally and in terms of bhava also. You know, their affection was in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We heard in detail in the chapter of the 10th canto where the queens, we mentioned this, we touched on it yesterday, the queens, along with all the whole entourage of Dwarka, went to Kurukshetra on the occasion of the solar eclipse, because it's a big deal, to be in a holy place on the occasion of the solar eclipse, and Kurukshetra was the place that conventionally was accepted as the place to go. And there they did rituals, etc., etc. And then Draupadi is asking each queen how their marriage took place, describe that wonderful event. And they, in a succinct way, described, and all but one of them described how, although they were, not although, their regard for Krishna was that of a maidservant. And the word maidservant, at least the way the Prabhupada uses the word maidservant, is not as the queen, but as the assistant of one who is the queen, is that the maidservant. And so they, the queens, viewed themselves in that particular mood, although they're queens and they had sons. And Krishna was the father and they had sons. But their view was strongly, not only, but strongly in the mood of dasya, along with conjugal love, Madhurya. So Madhurya with a strong influence of Dasya, this servant. And that's how they saw themselves. And that's how they saw their relationship, being the queen or the wife. Primarily, that was their mood. Again and again, it's described like that. So we're just getting, all of this is to get a picture. What Uddhava is describing is the topic of Krishna or Krishna Tattva, and Krishna Tattva in Vrindavan, Krishna Tattva outside of Vrindavan, and there's variety. And so along with this section, which is specifically Krishna and his queens, he's just speaking to Vidura in a forest in Vrindavan, meditating deeply on the Krishna Tattva. And he's a connoisseur of Krishna Tattva. He understands Krishna Tattva very well, and he's tasting it. He's experiencing ecstasy as he's describing it, but he's doing it as a service to one who he considers his superior, his senior, is Vidura. Senior, at least in terms of age, but also in terms of his vast knowledge. Uddhava had vast knowledge, and Vidura had vast knowledge. So it says this is part of Vaishnava decorum. There's deference to someone who has vast knowledge, even if one has vast knowledge. He's just showing us etiquette. That's one of the features of this pastime, of their description. But his primary absorption is the absorption in Krishna Tattva. And he understands Krishna Tattva very well. And there's a detail here that's I find very interesting. And I'm curious to look at commentary of our acharyas to see what they say, because I didn't do that before this class. In what way was this Vaibhav, Vilas, forms of the Lord different? I'll just go back in the purport. By his internal potency, the Lord can expand himself into various personalities of Swayam Prakash. So Swayam Prakash, the standard example of Swayam Prakash is Balaram. Balaram is a Prakash expansion. And then Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, they're expansions of Balaram, and they're in this Vilas category. They're of the same potency, but they're the expansion, they're angsas or expansions of the Swayam Prakash. It's technical. It's just for purpose of differentiating by category, because the conclusion is they're the same. If they're the same, then why have categories? Just it's a smoothie, because there's categories. So there's the Prakash forms and there's the Vaibhav forms. Vaibhava. And all of them are non-different from one another. They're non-different from one another, but they're different from one another. And it's not chronological, that first this, then that, then that. It's not a chronological differentiation. It's a tattva differentiation. And when hearing these tattvas, don't get confused. It's one entity. All of these forms are one entity. They're just differentiating not the chronological sequence, but the ontological relationship between the origin of everything and the expansions of the origin of everything. So they're in categories, Prakash and Vaibhava. So the forms that Krishna manifested for the princesses, they're in this Vaibhava feature. Vaibhava Vilas, Vilas means pastimes. So it's a pastime. It's one of the origin of everything, the Sarva Karana Karanam, Govinda, who's having a pastime. And those with whom he's having his pastime, in one sense, they're princesses. In another sense, they are the manifestation of his internal potency. They're expansions of Radharani, putting it really simply. It's said in Chaitanya Charitamrita very, very clearly that Srimati Radharani has many expansions, and those expansions are 3 categories, and then of course there's subcategories. But the Lakshmis in Vaikuntha are expansions of Radharani. The queens in Dwarka, they're expansions of Radharani. The gopis in Vrindavan, they're expansions of Radharani. No, it doesn't give the nomenclature of this type, that type, the other type, but as there are types of expansions for Krishna, there must be somewhere, besides what's written in Chaitanya Charitamrita, expansions of Radharani must have names. Prakash and Vaibhav, something like that. But as Krishna expands, Radharani expands. And that's how we're to understand. These princesses are they're expansions of Krishna's potency. Now, if that's the case, then how can they be imprisoned? How can they be imprisoned? That's not right. That's not nice. Why would Krishna have his own Radharani's expansions imprisoned? It's not nice. It's a pastime. And so their aspiration became intensified. So now let's go to the practical application for us. What about us? Sometimes we're put into difficult situations, isn't it? Sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. Now how's that? Because we're at least, we could say, or do some self-deprecation kind of thing. But we're sometimes put in difficulty. I know some people that are in difficulty, very severe difficulty, very severe difficulty. Whew. Did Krishna look the other way? Or he made a mistake? That's one conclusion some people come up with. Well, why good people suffer? Because God made a mistake. He's entitled to make mistakes. That's the conclusion. Something, without going into it, there are books that are extensive books writing. And why do bad things happen to good people? There's a Jewish author, I forget his name, and that's one of the threads in the book. He made a mistake. Because only good things should happen to good people, but sometimes bad things happen to good people. We made a mistake. It shouldn't happen. So it's as it is possible for direct expansions of Srimati Radharani to be put into difficulty. I mean, they're in prison. This is a detail that's also not described in the 10th canto, but they each had their own apartments. The painting, the BBT painting, shows they're all gathered together, like they're in a big prison or something like that. But anyway, it's specific. Each had their own apartment. So Krishna had to go to 16,100 different apartments and release them or something. Because the only other person he was with, as far as the description goes, was he's with Satyabhama. So maybe she went and unlocked everybody or something. But that's a lot of apartments. And there's no detail described. It's just mentioned. Maybe it's in some other Purana. I don't know. But their anxiety, this we do know, their anxiety is from the previous purport. They would, by Vedic culture, they would not be accepted as a wife by anyone. Any cultured person would not accept them. So now what? They want Krishna as their husband, and they wouldn't be accepted by anybody else. So why did Krishna accept them? Because they're his expansions of Radharani, and because of their love for him. So the circumstance didn't matter to Krishna, and he's not at fault. One could say, some persons might say, probably there are persons that say, he was at fault. He violated a code of conduct that's well known in Vedic culture. Something like, the passage from Ramayana where the fellow that was complaining, criticizing Ram, that he's keeping Sita, although she was separated from him after their marriage, and in the custody of Ravana, and all those bad things. He was criticizing Ram explicitly. And one can imagine, I can imagine, Krishna being criticized. And then how do we respond to that? It's like, maybe some of you heard that the China class where we were discussing the story of Banasrusha and Aniruddha. And somebody asked, did they break the regular principles? As if he's bound by, whatever he did, he's not bound by convention. We are bound by convention, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not. And why is that convention there for us? To elevate us through the modes of nature, because the tendency, being in contact with material nature, is to be degraded by the lower modes of nature. Therefore, the association we keep and the vidhis of proper conduct are very important for us. And then all of a sudden, Krishna is not bound by that. No, he abides by those principles, except when it goes against, a pastime purpose, and his pastime purposes supersede. So he married the princesses, although they had been A and B, outside of their home, not under the protection of their father for some period of time. And second, and in the custody or under the so-called protection of Narakasura. So now they're not to be married. No upstanding follower of the Vedas would marry them, and Krishna married them. So he's a violator of Dharma. Some persons might conclude, I'm sure, some persons conclude. And then therefore it's because he's lusty. And so even to say such things is offensive. But so we don't go there because he's a papa vidham. If he can purify the sins of us, then how is he going to be contaminated by sin? So he can do things that we can't do. He can lift Govardhan Hill, and he can do things that we can't do. He has that power, the capacity, the Shakti. So therefore, it's not like just whitewash, get out a brush and some white paint and just paint over everything, and it says pastime. It's pastime. It's not cosmetic cover-up. And so how is he enjoying? He's enjoying the challenge of defeating Narakasura. And from yesterday, we'll end with this, but from yesterday, he is his own son. He became corrupted by bad association. So even, it's another, puzzle, even his own son, he's ready to kill his own son. He's ready. He did. Now, in the killing of Narakasura, he was liberated. So, a fortunate person to become the son of the Supreme Lord and then to become corrupted and then become annihilated. I mean, interesting pastime. So, why does the Lord do these things? And one of the commentaries says that these kinds of things are there for the Lord to teach us A and B. Beware of bad association. And B, when you're in bad association and you become corrupted, you're responsible. So avoid bad association and avoid the bad activities that come from bad association because you're culpable. And the Lord wants to teach that. However, by birth or any other yardstick, you're an elevated person. Beware of bad association and don't become susceptible to the character, conduct, and behavior of bad association. You're culpable, whoever you may be. So let's see if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So you brought up that the Vidura and Uddhava, they are two great souls were, when they met, they were talking about, with their vast knowledge, they were talking about the glories of Krishna. So this is a practical question, like, how can we cultivate that given our, yeah.
Sadhu Sangha. Next.
But more often than not that, especially during Bhakti Vrukshas or any other festival, sometimes we talk about that, but it doesn't happen every time.
Well, that's because we're covered and contaminated. We practice anyway. Sadhu Sangha is a big cornucopia. It's a big reservoir of good things. And when you contact Sadhu Sangha, the qualitative way that you contact Sadhu Sangha is all important. So it's the principle, and then with the intention and sincerity of purpose. What's the purpose? What's the purpose of life? What's the purpose of Sadhu Sangha? What's the purpose of anything? So define the purpose. It's good to define the purpose. And then you take up Sadhu Sangha with that purpose and using this popular phrase, with mindfulness or with bhakti. This is a facility, the Bhakti Vriksha and the morning Bhagavatam class and etc. The practices of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, what you do when you're in the association of sadhus is bhajana kriya. Right? So and you do bhajana kriya in the association of sadhus. What's the purpose of bhajana kriya? What's the purpose of sadhu sangha? What's the purpose of life? And so the mindfulness, the purposefulness of engaging with sadhu sangha makes all the difference. And then you stay with it, you cultivate, practice it. Mindfully or purposefully. Even there's unsteadiness and there's ups and there's downs and there's all those yeah, but things. Carry on with faith, with submission, with regularity, with proper purpose. So just to put it in the phrase sadhusanga. Something else?
Yeah, just one question. So the internal potency, as we know, is Radharani herself. When the 16,100 queens are influenced by Yoga Maya, is that Radharani is expansion? So Radharani should be aware of what is going around, or is she influenced also by her own
Please,
potency?
don't try to enter into the mind of Radharani. You don't belong there. They're her expansions and they're fulfilling desire of Krishna. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I'm still thinking about your class from yesterday, where you said that Mahatma Gandhi, he thought that Krishna is fiction.
I'm just repeating what Prabhupada, I haven't read Gandhi's lectures. Prabhupada said that in Bombay, just today, it was an evening class, just today, reading transcripts of Gandhi's lectures, and here's what Gandhi said. So,
we see that people, I'm just sharing like appreciation, that people these days are so bewildered and they're so lost. So just reading Prabhupada's books every day, hearing from you every day, it brings so much proper sense of direction of where we should be going. Otherwise, we would also be just lost in this.
And the varieties of lost are so many. One can pick up this variety and then see something over there and get interested in that one over there and pick up that one over there and leave this one over here and just keep meandering in La La Land, perpetually. Even for people that have spiritual inclination, this is going on. So having spiritual inclination is special. And then such persons being misguided is conventional. So it's not easy. But the method is simple. Thank you for that comment. Now, what else?
So I'm trying to, so we're seeing this epidemic of cancer right now. Everywhere we turn around, there is cancer, cancer, cancer. So one of the devotees and I were discussing that it is the environmental factors that are, just the food we're eating, the pollution in the air. But according to what we understand, that it is due to the karma of the person.
But the karma can be nourished by these other things. Let's say, some persons that don't get cancer, they're exposed to the same stuff. On the other hand, there are things that one can do with one's lifestyle that inhibit the potential of one contracting cancer. You follow? So you're looking for cause.
Because, some of these people who get them, they're doing everything right. They're eating right, exercising, doing their everything. Yes. They're checking all the boxes of doing things right, and yet
sometimes
they end up with this.
Well, condition. Sometimes. So now how do we take that sometimes And how do we look at it? I like in principle, I like the verse from Sri Brahma Samhita and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's short commentary. The verse, Yas Twindra Gopamatavindra Mahosva Karma, you know the verse? Bandhana Rupa Palabhajana Matanoti, and then this other. For those who are Bhakti Bhajam, those who engaged in devotional service to Krishna, there's a different reason. We're looking at what's the cause behind this. So when Krishna engages from Indra Gopa up to Indra in something, it's their karma, and for the devotee, it's not their karma. So there's the world, and then there's the devotee, and for the devotee, it's something else. What's that something else? It's the uprooting of the very root cause of material existence. Because we're all going to die, so whether it's this or that or something else. And for the devotee, that there are devotees I know, not naming names, there's some devotees that contracted or had manifested cancer and had cancer treatment, and some survived and some had cancer diagnosis, and it was a kind of cancer they couldn't cure. Kanamakanana Swami. So it's not because of his karma. So what's the cause? He expressed his own words. It's just a change of service. And with detachment and looking forward to the journey, the next service. Whatever that might be, but another opportunity for service. So Krishna's, such persons, Krishna's calling, and the others, it's the very root of material existence. And what's the very root of material existence? It's turning attention away from the Supreme. So, with that, aside from cancer, let's take some other category off the shelf, like depression, or feeling overwhelmed by negative emotion, or just grappling with negative emotion. Those three, those kind of in the same direction. So why? What's the cause? And it's different for the non-devotee and different for the devotee. So one of the things, my understanding, limited, is, oversimplified maybe, but one of the things that persons who are in this profession, aside from properly managing that emotion, is having a sense of direction where I want to go. What's the at the soul platform and even the mind platform, what's good for me, and accept that which is good for me while I'm working carefully to manage the emotion. That's an opportunity being provided for the devotee, because the non-devotee doesn't have that proper direction. That's why and what to do. Is that right?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I was looking up the verse from 10th canto, 59th chapter regarding the marriage of all these princesses. And in the purport, Prabhupada says that Krishna expanded. Krishna was there in all the palaces. Mother Devaki, Vasudev, all the relatives were also simultaneously present in each of the palace. That was very It's very nice. It's just so beautiful. It's so
Quite
thrilling.
inconceivable, isn't it?
Yeah, inconceivable, and it feels like how much Krishna is doing to satisfy each of the princesses and expanding this way. And I just wanted one clarification. When subject matters like this, or subject matters like fifth canto or creation come up in discussions with, when I read Bhagavatam or other of our books, Srila Prabhupada books, the question comes, I don't understand, and so I don't feel attracted. That kind of discussion come. And
So I don't feel what?
attraction to these topics, like
Because I can't understand them.
so some kind of similar comments come from the groups that I read with, and I wanted to ask what I'm saying to them is proper or not. What I share is usually, it's not that everything we will just grasp and understand, but some topics are there for appreciation, admiration. And when we admire the root of all these topics and how each of these inconceivable nature of Krishna and his associates come in different ways to us, just by admiring, we are getting purified and we are getting closer to Krishna.
Yeah.
And whenever he thinks that we really can understand, he can make us understand, but it's not even necessary, or the focus is not to just understand, the focus is to appreciate.
If my intellect is not satisfied, then I lose interest. And that means what's important is that my intellect is satisfied. And if my intellect isn't satisfied, I lose interest. It doesn't hold meaning to me. I want this to go to something else. Then, that's a good indicator that the purpose to be served needs some reevaluation. We need to do a reset on what's the purpose to be served. I'll flip it around the other way. Why are these topics that are so difficult to understand in the Bhagavatam to begin with? Because it's not like Vyasadeva is sticking his tongue out at people saying, you're not going to understand this, ha, ha, ha. And he just puts stuff that people aren't going to understand. So why is it there? If it's something that's very, very few people can understand, why is it even there? And what's our purpose besides having our intellect satisfied because now we understand something we didn't understand? It's just information gathering, and that's not the purpose. New information. I put this piece together with that piece, and now I'm feeling satisfied. So my purpose has been served because my intellect is satisfied, because now I have lots of information, puzzle pieces that fit into my information basket very nicely. That's not the purpose. So that's saying on the negative side. So then what's the positive side, which is what you said? And as one becomes spiritually advanced, then things that are not easy to understand become understandable. Or, our acharyas who make commentaries on these things, they're not just pulling something out of the air because that sounds cool. It's their realization. And how do they get to that stage where they have realization of something that's not easy to understand is revealed to them? Because it's an aspect of the totality of Krishna. Prabhupada's explanation of all the details, for example, same point, all the details of Sankhya and how Krishna's energies are working, it is several times hearing those lectures. Several times he would say, knowing Krishna means to know everything. So there's not something that's to be known that's not in the Bhagavatam, because the details may not be entirely there, but the principle is, how does this material energy work? Or how is the universe constructed? for cosmology. And it's not, if it's not important, why is it even there? So if it's there must be some importance. And the importance is not, just unplug it. The importance is not that the reader should have their intelligence gratified and stroked and feel nice about things. It's just revealing truths about Krishna. It's Krishna Tattva. So as one becomes more accomplished, then one can understand various features of Krishna Tattva because it's complete. So supposing you're in your reading group, somebody likes this more than they like that. Okay, read the things that they like. And then what about the things that they're not so attracted to? Read it anyways. That's one solution. Just read it anyways, or skip over it because our group is not so elevated. They don't want to read something that they can't understand it. They don't want the purification of hearing. It's another way of saying the same thing. I've mentioned this the other day. When Prabhupada was giving Pandal programs in India, sometimes the audience was the kind of audience that wouldn't understand English, so he would speak in Hindi. And his Western disciples were looking at each other, ready to get up, and Prabhupada said, "Stay, because you'll benefit even you can't understand. Just stay, because it's purifying just to hear." So that's the faith. When they would recite the verses, he wanted them to recite the Sanskrit, even they wouldn't understand the Sanskrit. He would then explain the Sanskrit, but even just hearing, he wanted them to hear the Sanskrit because it's purifying. It's not. That's the faith of your reading groups. Is the sound vibration is purifying. That's why it's there, to purify. And gradually, as one becomes purified, you're closer to Krishna. Although it may not be that you've understood or saying the same thing. Prabhupada speaking about chanting Hare Krishna. People may understand, they may not understand. They may be attracted, they may not be attracted. It's beneficial. That's the faith of our founder Acharya, and that's the faith of the follower of our founder Acharya. Understanding or not understanding is not the criterion. Purification is. And purification isn't now my intellect is padded, so now I feel good. It's not the purpose. Something else?
Yes, I have a question and two online questions also. So my question is about mythology. People think that if they can't conceive or they did not hear from proper sources, they think that, something is like in the scriptures, whatever is mentioned in Puranas is a mythology. So, from time immemorial, the scriptures existing and there were demons and the atheists were also there, even in the earlier yugas. So
They're demons?
and atheists,
Deities? Atheists.
So I was thinking what time in the history does people started, more spread like it's a mythology, right? Because if we read the scriptures like Bhagavatam, for example, the kind of details Sukadeva Goswami gives about the even the Swayambhava Manu dynasty, right? Like details after details after details. So why? One reason maybe I was thinking maybe people doesn't have the complete conception of the scriptures, or they did not hear from proper sources. That's why they think it is a mythology. If that is true, what time in the history that this kind of people started thinking that is a mythology, not actually reality?
Your question is, at what point in history did people start thinking
something like that happened? Or,
Oh, I don't know what point in history.
I was hearing earlier, I think Bhakti Charumara's class, one of the classes, he mentioned about the clock. So that's when people started, even the earlier scientists were also kind of have some kind of conception of God, like even Newton and all.
Yes.
But I think when the people started able to create more things on their own, like using science, they thought, okay, there's God not there.
That's one manifestation, but the question, the first question was, when did it start happening? You know, but you said it in the beginning. It's since time immemorial. There are two classes of people: Sura and Asura, divine, demoniac. You know, it's not when they started creating other things. They may have gotten, you know, a branch that looked like this, but it was there since time immemorial. All right, so that's your question. Online?
This is from Divyambar Mataji. How does one avoid the bad association, which is one's mind at times as not completely purified yet?
Wait a minute. How does one avoid bad association when what?
Which is one's mind.
Which is one of?
Mind.
My mind. Bad association with one's mind.
Which is not purified.
So how do you avoid associating with your own mind? That's the question? Detachment. I mean, you know, that requires intelligence. You can look at the contaminated mind and go, gosh, how unfortunate, my dear mind, that you become contaminated by bad association. So now that's intelligence is going to give some direction. Let's go here. So it's with detachment. So where does one get such intelligence? From Super Soul, and from Scripture, and from Guru Sadhu Shastra. So you cultivate accordingly, and then the mind can become purified. The next question. It's a different way of asking it, but the root problem is the mind, and the mind that's contaminated by modes of nature and bad desires. Next.
This is Amrit Keli Mataji. She's driving, so she sent it audio. Can I play that?
If you read it slowly, yeah.
No. Audio.
She sent an audio
Because
message.
she's driving, she could not type it.
She can ask it later. It's too complicated. Someone else? Yes.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Raj, this conclusion that God made a mistake, that seems like so depressing and hopeless.
Yeah. But, you know, the person who wrote this was a rabbi. And, you know, God's entitled to make a mistake.
Wow. So I was just...
Yeah. But, you know, that's what the world is filled with variety, isn't it?
Yes, Guru Maharaj. And I was just appreciating how fortunate we are to be able to get that, you know, that
Proper
the Lord
shelter.
is Achyuta.
Same as what she was saying. Yeah.
Infallible. And I mean, what a huge shelter that, you know.
And there's a lot of toxicity out there, and so we shouldn't be naive about it. We should be circumspect, and when we see toxicity, recognize what it is, and not indulge in it. Not become, oh, maybe here's a not so bad toxicity. At the same time, we should not be condescending. We should, you know, an advanced person like the swan can take milk from a filthy place, or gold from a filthy place, or a good wife from of good character, regardless of her background. Those kinds of things are said. So, truth is truth. Then the truth that's there may have some like gold ore, and you have to take the gold from the gold ore. And you have to know how to take the gold from the gold ore. You don't throw the gold ore out. So But you have to be careful and be guided properly. That's just in a comment, right?
Yes, Guru Maharaj. One other thing, with the new temple opening, we are taking various roles in.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I heard yours. Yeah. So,
to be able to do that service properly without offending others, because there will be times where there will be differences of opinion. And
welcome to the real world. And differences of opinion in regarding this service, that service, the other service is just fine. And you're given in a service where you don't, you have to move forward with your service. So you can factor in differences, and then you make decision and you move forward with the purpose that this is the inspiration that I received, and my authority is fine with that inspiration, and I'm moving forward. And other people can process things however they process things. That's their responsibility, not yours. You have one more. Clarification.
On this topic of purification, the purification comes for us by following the process of chanting and hearing, and at the same time doing our swadharma.
During the which?
Our swadharma, prescribed duties.
Yeah, when performing
doing our prescribed duties.
Yeah.
Purification comes through that.
Sure.
And then
yeah. But that just qualify by doing each one of those things, hearing, chanting, and performing prescribed duties. A qualifier is the intention behind each of those activities, and how much are we remaining focused on the intention. Meaning, we're not always focused on the intention. We're more focused on the behavior than the intention behind the behavior. And that's okay. That's just a stage of purification. And a symptom of spiritual progress is we're more attentive to and more staying focused on the purpose behind. That's bhakti. That is, the purpose behind is Krishna is to be pleased. Like this question here with services for the temple opening. Krishna is to be pleased. And while that Krishna is to be pleased doesn't mean that every potential opinion about a service has to be factored into doing the service, and you'll go nuts. Nor will everyone be satisfied even if you tried that method. So you have to use a different method, but the goal is that Krishna is pleased, so that you're concerned about differences of view on something in your occupation, in your hearing and chanting, etc. But stay focused on the purpose. And if there is some defect, Krishna will help. We'll end there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.